We've got a special guest with us, Dan Bilzerian, and his social media influencer, entrepreneur, rose to fame as the king of Instagram for his extravagant lifestyle and high-stakes poker play. He is currently running to challenge GOP Congressman Randy Fine in Florida's 6th congressional district, while this month the Israeli Ministry of Diaspora Affairs and Combating Anti-Semitism ranked Bilzerian as the most prominent anti-Semitic influencer in the world. Proud to bring on the #1 anti-Semite in the world, Dan Bilzerian. Thank you for coming on, buddy.
There we go. That's the introduction I want.
Okay, fantastic. Now, I just want to, real quick, I've been wanting to talk about this since it happened, but I figured I'd wait till I had you on. Now, this is the guy you're running against. This is
yeah, that beauty of a man. There he is.
He's the guy. He's definitely not doing one meal a day. So now you called him a fat Jew. Now, you can see he is fat and he is a Jew. And
Correct.
So you were brought on TMZ, and I just want to play a little bit of this because it's funny to me. These guys were foaming at the mouth trying to corner you on this, and let's just see how it went.
You called your opponent this fat Jew. So he's not from Israel, but you called a guy in Florida this fat Jew. How is that not anti-Semitic?
Well, he's a Jewish supremacist, and he puts Israel before America, and I think that he should be tried for treason.
This fat Jew is anti-Semitic.
Yes.
Dan.
I mean that's what you say, but how about
that's
every
what
single time
that's what I know. I don't say it. I know
he
it.
literally talks about how Muslims are lower than dogs. So is that Islamophobic?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, it is.
And Harvey had to think about it for a second. Now, you talk a lot about, this is a perfect example of there's a special cutout for Jewish people. And you can, if I called someone a fat Italian, or if I called someone a fat Armenian, that would not be seen as a slur towards Italians or Armenians. But for some reason, when you say it about someone who's Jewish, that is anti-Semitic. Can you understand their thinking at all? What is that about?
Well, they like to put themselves in a victim category. And that's really the main issue here. And that's why Jewish supremacy is such a threat, is because not only are they the most privileged class in the world, but they've somehow managed to back themselves into a victim category. So they are beyond reproach. If you criticize them, they have this special word, anti-Semitism. And what that does is, because of how they've baked it in with the media and movies, it kind of, gives people pause. It's like, oh man, that sounds really bad, anti-Semitism. The funny thing is, most of the Jews in Israel aren't technically Semites. They don't, they're not from that region. They're Eastern European, and they don't speak a Semitic language. Semite is an Arab, somebody that speaks Aramaic or a language from that region, and they don't really qualify for that. So it's just kind of like one more thing that they've hijacked and stolen, which is why I push back so much on the anti-Semitic term, is because I don't feel like it's an accurate description of what they're saying.
And so so here's Randy Fine, and he's only been in Congress a short time, and he's already taken over $1 million from AIPAC, which is just one of the funding ways that the Zionist lobby influences and funds of politicians in the United States. It's just one. So there's, of course, look at Miriam Adelson gave $250 million directly to Trump. So there's other ways for the Zionists too. So that's just one. But walk us through. Now, you were never a political guy. You never ran for office. What made you decide? I mean, you're a former, military guy. What made you decide to do this?
Well, I traditionally wasn't a super political guy. I never had any intentions on, being in Congress or anything like that. I think at the start of this, if you want to call it a war, I call it a genocide, that Israel started perpetuating upon these Palestinians, I think it forced people to kind of start confronting this issue, because there's just so much unequivocal data, all these, images, you've got photos, videos I mean, everything from killing aid workers to double tapping hospitals, which means you basically hit the hospital, then you wait for, the journalists and the family and whatever to come over there and try and save people from the rubble, and then you hit them again. You've got paramedics that are driving down the street with their lights, flashing and whatever, and they're just being gunned down by Israelis. They denied that, and then they later found the footage in the shallow graves that they put these paramedics in. And then you see the children being shot in the head. You've got the soup kitchen workers that were registered with the Israeli military that were obviously targeted because they hit two cars miles apart that were registered with the IDF as being soup kitchen workers. And then you see in the group chats the Israelis, laughing about this and whatever. And it's so much that you can't argue, that this is a war. This is clearly a genocide. And I think the biggest piece of it was that we're funding it and that we're supporting it. And that is, I think, what opened a lot of people's eyes. And then you start kind of like zooming out and you look at how much of our national debt is because of our support of Israel when you compound the interest, because every dollar that we gave them wasn't just extra money we had lying around. We borrowed every single dollar that we've ever given Israel and given Egypt on behalf of Israel. And so you have to do the compounding interest. Then you look at the wars that we fought. Netanyahu came and he testified in front of Congress that they had weapons of mass destruction. And so we fought the Iraq war on a false, premise for them, really. They're the ones that wanted that regime toppled. That cost us, by the most conservative estimates, $8 trillion. So if you look at the compounding interest that you would have to add to that as well, we're at over $20 trillion, which is more than half of our national debt just because of our support of a country that's never done anything for us. They've sold our secrets. They've attacked us. I could go on, but I look at that and I'm like, man, this system is broken. Then you've got the Epstein files that they're refusing to release. 4 months after they were, according to Congress, legally obligated to release these files, they still have not done so. And then the Iran war was the last straw for me. That was just such a ridiculous thing for us to get involved in when we had all the different advisors told us that they were not a credible threat. They didn't have nuclear missiles. They didn't have ICBMs. It was just, anyways, I could go on, but the reason I'm getting involved is because I feel like everybody's frustrated and nobody's doing anything about it. And because I have a big following, I feel like I have an obligation to kind of step forward and do this, because if I don't, nobody else will.
And so let me just, so you've said, a lot of people, I say that, because I know a lot of Jews that don't support Benjamin Netanyahu. They don't support Israel. They don't support Zionism. And so what I always say, and in fact, most of the Jews I know, and in the United States anyway, so what I always say, Zionism. I say the problem isn't Jews, but it's Zionists. But you don't say that. Tell me what you say and why do you say it?
That's a good question. So I don't frame it as a Zionist problem because I believe that it's a Jewish supremacy problem. And the reason I believe that is because Jewish supremacy has been causing problems since long before Israel's inception. And I think it's a religious issue. I think it's because they think that they're better than everybody, that they're chosen from God. Their religious texts, say that they're allowed to lie, cheat, and steal from Gentiles. It says that, Gentiles were basically like cattle to them. Not to mention, they believe that Jesus Christ, the Lord and Savior for Christians, is burning in human shit in hell. The Virgin Mary's a whore, and that Christians are idol worshipers, and that's why they spit on them in Israel. So I look at this as a Jewish supremacy problem, and Zionism is kind of like an offshoot of that.
So what do you? So I've heard that. So Kurt, who's normally on the show with me, he makes that they believe that Jesus Christ is burning in hell and shit. And then I had a Jewish friend text me and said, I'm 50 years old. I never heard that before. But so where do you get that from?
Well, there's many sources. The Talmud is one. Peter Schaefer, he was the head of Judaic studies at Princeton, and he was also the head of the board at the Museum of I believe it was Jewish History, or the Holocaust Museum in Berlin. And he wrote a book called Jesus and the Talmud, and he lines out exactly all the different passages word for word of what they say about Jesus Christ in there. And It's really vile stuff, and it is just contrary to, the Christian religion. So it's not something that every single Jew believes. I'm not saying that. And I'm not also saying that every single Jew is a problem. What I'm saying is that the Jewish supremacist mindset is causing a big problem. And I also feel like this is a perfect example of, if you were to say Russians are causing problems, you wouldn't have to qualify that with saying, but not every Russian is a problem. When Bill Maher makes all these statements about, Muslims, are they're the worst, and the mother load of bad ideas is Islam, and Randy Fine says, kill them all. They never have to qualify that with, but not all Muslims are bad. But for some reason, when you criticize Jewish supremacy or Zionism, you have to then carve out this thing of like, but not every Jew is bad. Like, obviously, not every Jew is bad. I mean, only an idiot would say that every single person, of a 16 million population, ethnicity, religion, whatever you want to call them, is a bad person. I'm not saying that. It would be a silly thing to say that. However, you can say that they are causing a massively disproportionate amount of problems, and that any kind of a supremacist mindset is going to cause issues. Anytime you think that you're better than other people, you look at South African apartheid, you look at, anything historically, anytime a group thinks that they're better than other people, traditionally they do not treat them with the same humanity that they would treat their own tribe. And so when I look at a Jew, and this is, let's just go back 5 years. When I look at a Jew, I looked at him as like, an equal. There was no better. There was no worse. I had no animosity towards them. In fact, the idea that a Jew wouldn't like me never even crossed my mind, because in my mind, we've always stuck up for Jews. We saved them in World War II. We've always been a friend of the Jews. And so why would a Jew ever not like me? And when I really started to dive into the religion and see what their chief rabbis are saying, and see what the Talmud says, and see how they've behaved historically in the history that they never teach us about, like the Bolshevik genocide, the Holodomor, all these instances where Jews are mass murdering Christians, which they never talk about in the textbooks and never teach us, and things that preceded World War II, then you start getting a little bit better of a picture of what actually happened historically and not just what you were taught.
So, how are you going to combat the attacks that say that you don't make that distinction, that you say we have a Jew problem, and instead of saying we have a Zionist problem? And do you think that maybe it would be smart for your campaign to try to temper that so people don't get the wrong idea?
Nope. One of the things about my campaign is that I'm not going to craft my message in any way, shape, or form to appeal to people. I'm going to tell the unadulterated truth. It is not going to be shaped at all for the group that I'm talking to. I'm going to say what I truly believe. And and you're either going to like me or you're not going to like me, but you're going to like me or not like me based on what I truly believe, and not a crafted version that I think is going to appeal to my audience. So I'm specifically not going to craft any message. I'm just going to be completely honest. And I think that's what politicians today are lacking, is raw honesty. You thought that you were going to get that with Trump, and then you got an absolute narcissistic, pathological liar. And so, that's a very important piece of my campaign. And one of the reasons why I'm running is because I believe that politicians have an obligation to be completely honest. And like I said, I'm not saying that we have a Jew problem. I'm saying it's a Jewish supremacy problem. I mean, I would say that, Jews are causing a disproportionate amount of problems. I'm not going to apologize for that. I didn't choose this fight. And the reason I'm not going to focus on Zionism, because that just focuses on Israel and our support of Israel. And I think this is a much deeper rooted issue. I look at it as what's going on also in America, and the fact that homosexuality and transgenderism and all these things are being pushed on us by the Jewish media, by, Hollywood, which is predominantly Jewish, run by Jews. And that is the message they're pushing on me. That's the message they're pushing on children. And it is kind of, the attack on masculinity. I look at all of this stuff, and it's coming from the Jewish community. This isn't coming from Muslims. It's not coming from Christians. The Talmud has 8 different genders. The Bible has 2. The Quran has 2. So, I don't care about gays, right? I'm not like this homophobic guy. I've always had gay assistants. I've been around gays. I don't mind it at all. My issue is when it's being force fed to you in a disproportionate amount on every different media platform, and it's being pushed on children. And in every single movie, you've got some subservient beta male that is, kissing his wife's ass. His wife is usually cheating on him. He's apologizing and trying to win her back. And they're basically attacking the white Christian man, if you want to, really just break it down to brass tacks. And so I didn't choose this fight. I'm not like a white nationalist. I'm not a white supremacist or anything like that. But I'm also part white, and I am, I consider myself a masculine man. I'm, traditional. And so they're basically attacking everything that I am, and it's totally unprovoked. And that's my big issue. And I think just saying Zionist focuses on Israel. And to me, Israel is a manifestation of that religion. It is the purest form of Jewish supremacy, but I don't think it just stops there.
So I look at it that the Zionists hijack the Jewish religion, because if you talk to some of the most conservative Hasidic Jews, they think that the state of Israel is a blaspheme against God, and that they're not supposed to have a state of Israel until the Savior comes back. And so you know about that, right?
Yes, no, that's completely correct. But what I'm saying is, like, before Israel's inception, you had Jewish terrorists over there, the Irgun, the Haganah, the Stern Gang. They blew up the King David Hotel. They were murdering British people. You had, like I said, the Bolshevik genocide. You had the Holodomor. You had Jews literally targeting and killing Christians. I mean, they burnt down over 40,000 churches in Russia, which was a predominantly Christian country, right? And this was an absolute Jewish leadership. Putin said that. Hitler said that. Alexander Solzhenitsyn said that. Churchill said that in Zionism versus Bolshevism, the struggle for the Jewish soul. He specifically said that the Bolshevik leadership was predominantly Jewish. And so this is Jews targeting and killing Christians, and this is before Israel's inception. So once again, I'm saying Jews have been targeting Christians before Israel was formed. And so I don't like to just focus on Zionism, because that focuses more on Israel, which I'm not saying is not a problem. I'm just saying I think the problem is a little bit more deep-rooted, and I also see it in the United States as well. And you see that, why would they spit on Christians? And why is that part of their culture? That's not a Zionist ideology. That is a Jewish, looking at Christians as being idol worshipers. And that didn't just happen in the last 100 years. They believe that. I mean, that's the fundamental difference. And look, people can have different religious beliefs. That's fine. But don't pretend to be my friend. Don't pretend to be my ally and then secretly hate me. That's my issue. Because Muslims don't secretly hate Christians. Muslims revere Christ. They look at him as a great prophet. They think that he's going to come back and save the world. And they believe that the Virgin Mary was a virgin. So, if you look at how that religion looks at Christians, they also preserved all the Christian churches. They have a Christian population, a lot of those Muslim countries, and they've always treated me with a ton of respect, a lot more respect than I would get in Israel. So that's one of the reasons why I don't like to just only say Zionist. And I know that that's like a safer word and what everybody wants to, have you do. But I think that kind of doesn't really focus on the entirety of the issue, which is that the Jewish religion does not like Christians deep down.
So let me give you get your response to this. So Jewish people make up approximately 0.2% of the world's population. And the reason why it's different than other generalizations is the Jewish question. First, what do we do with the Jews? Now phrased after 1948 as, what do we do with those Jews over there and the ones over here who support that place? Anti-Zionism is the new Jewish question, which is 5,000 years old with a new coat of paint. How do you push back on that?
Like push back in what sense? Like they're saying that they've been constantly persecuted? Because I also don't believe that narrative either. I look at what they've been doing today. They've been trying to paint themselves as victims in this whole like, oh, but October 7th and they tried to genocide the Jewish people. And it's just bullshit. They killed maybe 1,000 people. And Israel allowed that to happen. They also employed the Hannibal Directive, where they killed their own citizens to pump the numbers up. They were shelling kibbutzes with the tanks. They were shooting cars with Apache helicopters, Hellfire missiles. And so, and they took 6 hours to respond in a place the size of the state of New Jersey. Like, it's just nonsense. This is the most heavily surveilled region. They allowed that attack to happen. They've been funding Hamas. This whole thing was orchestrated so that they could steal that land and finally get the Greater Israel Project, which they're clearly pushing for today, which is why they keep shelling Lebanon and they refuse to, honor any of their ceasefires or our ceasefires, any of our peace deals, is because they want the Greater Israel Project. They don't want peace. They want more land. And they've been continuing to steal more land ever since, Israel's inception in 1948. I mean, the West Bank was never supposed to be theirs. Hamas has never been in the West Bank, and yet they steal land there. They're bulldozing homes. They're colonizing it. They're setting, the trees on fire. I mean, that's where they, ran over Rachel Corrie. And then after they ran her over in a bulldozer, this is an American citizen. They had pancake parties all over Israel to mock her death. I mean, these are not our allies. These are bastards, and I'm not going to pretend like they're not. It's just, I'm tired of it. I'm tired of them murdering people. I'm tired of them using our tax dollars to do it. And I'm tired of them stealing land. I'm tired of them, attacking their neighbors unprovoked. I mean, they attacked 7 countries in a year. Who else has ever even done that? 7 countries unprovoked in a year. That's craziness.
So, I've said before, to speak to your point. So they did a survey, Penn State University, in collaboration with the Israeli polling firm, they did a survey, and in March of 25, among 1,005 Jewish Israeli respondents, nationally representative sample of Jewish Israeli internet users. It was published by Haaretz in late May 25, and the key matches. So what they found out was that 82% support forced expulsion, transfer of Palestinians from Gaza. 56% support expulsion of Arab/Israeli citizens of Israel, and 65% believe a modern-day Amalek exists, with a high percentage seeing the biblical annihilation command as still applicable. So, were you aware of that, and how do you respond when you hear that?
Yeah, I mean, they've done studies, and the majority of Israelis also believe that they're operating in apartheid. I mean, this is not just an Israeli government problem. This is like the citizens believe in this stuff. The citizens set up observation nests to watch the shelling of Gaza. It's a sick society, and it's a society that believes in Jewish supremacy. And so, yeah, I mean, you're seeing it in 4K. I mean, these people are specific. I mean, look, I was in the military. I went through some sniper training. You do not pull the trigger when you are sniping with an optic until you have a very clear view of your target. You know exactly what the bullet's going to hit, and you know it's behind the target. They're shooting children in the head. That's not an accident. When you're a sniper, you don't accidentally shoot a child in the head. You don't accidentally shoot a child in the heart. Like, that's not something that's like, oh, whoops, we just shot a kid. Like, this is not machine gun fire. This is from a sniper rifle, one shot to the head. And when you look through a high power optic, you know exactly what is on the other end of that, the receiving end of that rifle. And so this is something where it's just very clear. These aren't one-off incidences. I could rattle off, Hind Rajab. I could talk to you, for hours about all the atrocities they've committed. I mean, Hind Rajab, I mean, they shot her car. She was on the phone with paramedics. They shot the paramedics. They killed her whole family. These are unarmed people. This is like a, 6 or 8 year old girl. She's in the car. She's on the phone with paramedics. She's crying. They're coming out. They want to save her from the car. And the tank shot it like 370 times, 350 or 370 times. I mean, it's absurd. And, and these are not, like I said, one-off instances. They've done so much horrific stuff over there that they clearly just do not look at these Palestinians or Muslims as humans. I mean, they're training their dogs how to rape prisoners. They were caught gang raping Palestinian prisoners on the cameras. I mean, you can see it clear as day, and they acquitted everybody. They didn't charge any of them. They became celebrities. They just passed laws saying that, you can kill Muslims, you can get the death penalty for them, but you can't for Jews. I mean, it's like, if this isn't an ethnocentric apartheid state that has no regard for, non-Jews, I don't know what is. I mean, this is the clearest example of supremacy that we've ever seen in our lifetime. And for some reason, it's supposed to be ignored because they're Jewish, and I'm just not having it.
I've heard a lot of people make the argument that, well, look at all the Muslims. They get to have all these countries. The Arabs and Muslims have all their countries. Why can't Jews have one country? What do you say to that?
Well, I mean, there's 2 billion Muslims, right? So a quarter of the globe is going to have to inhabit more than 16 million. And it's not like the Jews are homeless. They're in all the nicest, best places in the world. They're massively overrepresented in Beverly Hills. They're massively overrepresented in New York City. They're massively overrepresented in Miami. They've been pretty much welcomed around the world prior to this genocide anywhere. I mean, all the nicest European countries. I mean, everywhere that I would travel was disproportionately populated with Jews. I know because I was friends with tons of them. I actually probably had as many Jewish friends as I had Christian friends, which is an insane thing considering they're, 0.2% of the population, right? So clearly I didn't have a bias. And they're all just happen to be rich guys, right? So it's something that you can't say, oh, well, they're like homeless people, they don't have a land or whatever. Like, not everybody gets their own country that they just get to steal from people. And so when you're a small population, you don't have a right to a country. And you don't have the right to just steal a country from somebody else. So I don't feel bad for them. They're like I think they're over half of the billionaires in America. So it's not like these people are struggling. They're the most privileged class in the entire world. And so this idea of like the struggling victim Jew that needs their own country and needs special laws and all this stuff to protect them, it's just bullshit, and I'm not going to pretend that it's not.
Well, I live in Hollywood, and I don't know if you know, but it's run by the Arabs, and
yeah, I can tell. I see it in the movies. Every terrorist Arab.
So let's talk about. Okay, so I think I covered this topic. I think you got it. I think people know where you stand. Now, the district you're running in, there's not really that many Jewish people that live there, right? So it's kind of crazy how. I'm surprised at how it's obvious Randy Fine is Israel first and doesn't really give a shit about the United States at all. And he'll stick it right in your face. He doesn't care unless he's pressed on it and he's trying to trick people. Are you surprised that he's popular in that district? And how hard do you think it will be to unseat him?
That's a good question. I really think a lot of this comes down to just money, and they just put a bunch of money behind this guy. And it's really hard for the average guy to compete against that, right? Like when you're spending millions of dollars and you've got people showing up at people's doors, they're running ads, and you're seeing a name, and he's hitched his wagon to Trump, and a lot of people got behind Trump. So his message is, I'm a big Trump supporter, I'm this and I'm that, and I'm super Republican. And one of the problems is I think a lot of the older generation is still kind of like stuck in this like left-right thing of like the people on the right are like, oh, the liberals are the problem and they're idiots and whatever. And then the left is like, oh, it's the white supremacists. It's these neo-Nazis on the right. And you have this like very strict divide where the people on the right just want somebody that's like really, really Republican. And so I think he came in there with those talking points of like, oh, I'm really Republican and and we got to get these Democrats and we got to ship out all these foreigners. And, he just says things that is going to resonate with people. He researches what people care about, what's going to resonate with them, and then he just repeats it. And then when he gets in office, he just sends all their fucking money to Israel and says, go fuck yourself. But then every time he's on TV, he just parrots these talking points that he thinks is going to resonate with him. And that's politics in America, is some asshole saying exactly what he thinks everybody wants to hear and then doing what's best for him and his donors. And that's the problem with the system. That is the crux of the issue, is you've got people have no allegiance to the truth, have no allegiance to the country, have no allegiance to their voting base, and just do whatever's best for them. And there's no repercussions elections. And every time you go into the ballot, it's fucking bad or worse. It's Kamala or it's Trump, or it's Biden or it's Trump. You got, shithead or shithead. And, and it doesn't seem like anything that you vote for matters, because they all do the same thing. They all fund these foreign countries. They all support these foreign wars. They're all run by these Zionist lobbies. And so I think you've got, finally now people are waking up, and I think you've got frustration. The question really is going to come down to, can the older generation figure this out, or can we get the younger generation to actually turn out and vote? Because we got about 800,000 people in that district, and we really only need about 60,000 of them to come out and vote. So if I can mobilize some of the youth that actually already is hip to this problem and understands what's going on politically, then we win. If we can knock on enough doors and show these, the older generation that he's, funding, using your tax dollars to fund a foreign country. And meanwhile, we've got interstates that are, completely dilapidated and haven't even been repaired, but we're funding a foreign war. I think you just hit them with the facts, and I think they'll understand. The question is going to be, can we raise enough money to knock on the doors and to, explain the situation to the older voters? And that's politics, and so I guess we're going to find out.
So we're taught, just like we were taught that Muslims are the enemy of Christians, we're taught that places like China and are horrible, and yet or Saudi Arabia and all these places are horrible. Yet they have things that we can't have. It's like we have the surveillance state here. They're going to turn us onto digital currency. And yet we don't have high-speed rail. We don't have, our cities are crumbling. We have homeless people everywhere. We don't invest in our own country. We can't even get healthcare. The rest of the Western world, nobody, Trump had that, he had the DoorDash grandma. I don't know if you saw that photo op stunt they did where they had a grandma deliver DoorDash to him, and he was bragging about he took the taxes off tips, which was great. I support that. But not one of the reporters there asked Trump, well, don't you think it's horrible that a grandmother has to work a minimum wage delivery job instead of being taken care of like they take care because her husband has cancer and they're afraid to go bankrupt? Nobody else goes bankrupt when they get cancer in the Western world, but except here in the United States. How would you fix
it? It's absurd. It's absolutely absurd, and I completely agree with you. You know who would disagree with you is Ben Shapiro. He thinks that we need to raise the age of retirement, that people should be working until they're 80. He's such a retard. I find it funny, too, that all these Jews that are pushing us towards these foreign wars never actually sign up themselves. They never sign on the dotted line. If you look at the religion in this country that is the least represented in the military, it is the Jews. And so they push us disproportionately for these foreign wars, and they never sign up. But to answer your question, I think that we should basically eliminate all taxes on anybody that makes less than 50, maybe 75,000 a year, just 0% tax. I think we should completely eliminate the IRS. I think we should do a flat tax. You should do sales tax. I think we also need to start balancing our checkbook correctly. The government's just run so inefficiently. You've got agencies like the ATF that has absolutely no business existing. They serve no purpose. We don't need to regulate tobacco. We don't need to regulate alcohol. It's like, what the fuck are we even talking about here? These are like age-old, agencies that were, maybe valid during the Prohibition or whatever, but we have a bloated government, and it just keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And you look around, and to your point, you look at these other countries. Israel has fucking healthcare. You get cancer in Israel, your government's not just going to let you die. But here, people join the military, they go fight, they fight in these foreign wars, and come back, and a lot of them are homeless. They're on the street. If they needed a surgery, they couldn't get it. And it's embarrassing, and it's totally unnecessary. You look at how much money it would cost to give, health care, to solve the homeless problem, all these things. And it's like, it's not a lot of money compared to what we are giving in foreign aid, how much money we're spending. I mean, just look at this war, for instance. How much money we've already spent. They're trying to raise hundreds of billions of dollars for that. And I think people lose sight of how much money $100 billion is, or hundreds of billions, and what that could do for America. And I think we need to start focusing on our own country before we start shipping a bunch of money out to help foreign countries, especially to fight foreign wars that have no impact whatsoever and don't serve, they never served a threat to the American, people at all. And so, yeah, I agree. I think we need to start focusing within. I think we need to fix our own problems, and, we could start at healthcare.
So would you be, what do you think of the idea of, so Trump wants to spend $1.5 trillion. Now, what I like to tell people is the difference between $1 million and $1 billion is roughly $1 billion. People have, and so if we don't need to spend $1.5 trillion on our military, we maybe we spend 10 times more than all the 10 countries combined next to us. So if we took that money instead, because all that money does is go into the pockets of weapons manufacturers, and if we took that money instead and told people in the United States, hey, you want a job, we'll give you a job, like FDR did. You want a job, we'll give you a job. And we've got the money. We prove it. We just throw it away on foreign wars that nobody wants. And we give it to weapons manufacturers that nobody wants. And so would you be for something like that? So we could, it's like half the country can't even afford a $500 emergency. 80% of workers live paycheck to paycheck. Wouldn't you be for actually making America great again?
Absolutely. I mean, and you have to understand, our military is so bloated and it's so unnecessary. And Iran has given us a very good lesson over there on, they're sending out a $20,000 drone, $30,000 drone, and we're spending millions of dollars to down that drone. Like, warfare is being fought very differently today. And this idea that we need to spend all this money on all this obsolete equipment, when at the end of the day, the nuclear deterrent really is all you need. Right? You don't need this crazy bloated military unless you want to go invade a bunch of foreign countries, which I don't think we should be doing anyways. I think we should be, focusing on helping Americans as opposed to killing foreigners. And so, yes, I completely fucking agree. This is just an absolute waste of money. And I just, it's just very clear to me that the people in government don't actually give a shit about the people. And you see it in their decisions, because to spend $1.5 trillion to potentially kill foreigners when you can't even take care of the people in your own country. I mean, I think every single person in America should have basic needs met. I mean, we are in the 20th century. We are the most technologically advanced, one of the best armed, whatever. There is absolutely no reason why human beings in America should be dying of starvation, living on the streets. People in even foreign countries should be, dying of thirst. Like, it's just, I don't know, man. I kind of I think if you just zoom out and look at this, like, if you were a kid, and you're at the lunch table and you've got, let's say you're a billionaire. So you've got 70 lunches and you look across and there's like kids that have nothing. That's how I kind of look at billionaires. It's like, there's people starving in the world and you've got, 700 million pails of lunch. And you can't just fucking hand these guys one. I just think that it's just such a greedy mentality to have so much money that you could never spend it in 20 different lifetimes while people are starving to death. So, yeah, I just I think people are looking at life wrong. It's not about accumulating the biggest number in your bank account, especially once you get to the point where you can't spend it. Especially when there's people suffering. I mean, it's just, I don't know. I think humanity's kind of lost touch a little bit with what's important.
So you would, like in Finland, they have, they were one of the lowest in education metrics, right? And so they decided to put not just one teacher in each classroom, they put 3 teachers in each classroom so that kids got individual attention. And they don't have, like in the United States, my wife was a teacher in the public school system in California, and they had sometimes 40, 45 kids in a classroom, and then she had to teach 6, 7 classes. There's nobody can do that in an effective way. And so would you be again, that's be another thing. Instead of spending money on war, would you spend it on educating our kids and giving everybody healthcare? You'd be for that, right?
I would definitely be for the healthcare. I think for the schools, rather than have more teach, I would change the curriculum. I think that a lot of the things that we are learning as kids is completely worthless, especially now with these, every cell phone that you have can do every algebraic equation. You've got AI that can solve anything. We don't need to be focusing on memorizing, historical dates and all that stuff. When you focus on history, you should learn about past events, what people did wrong, what shaped thought, why countries did certain things. You should learn so that you don't repeat mistakes instead of just memorizing a bunch of dates, memorizing a bunch of people's names. I think with math, this idea of we're doing, multiple, algebra 1, algebra 2, a bunch of math that you never use in your life, but nobody learns how to, just balance a checkbook or file a tax return or, do things that you would just have to do in daily life. That's not taught in school. And so I think our whole curriculum is just a bit of a waste of time. And it seems to be kind of like really focused on almost making you obedient. That's the way I would look at schools. I think it's more focused on teaching you to follow rules instead of learning things that will help you in life. That's why, tons of super successful people were, they never even went to college,
Bill Gates didn't get a college degree. Same thing with Steve Jobs, right? So those are the two biggest tech guys in the world. They didn't go. So, I live in California, and it's 100% Democrat state. Democratic governor, Democratic Senate, Democratic House, and the place is falling apart. We got homeless people everywhere. They spent $24 billion. They said they spent that on trying to fix homelessness. Yet when the House and the Senate unanimously passed a bill to find out how they spent that money, Governor Newsom vetoed it. And that really happened. And so now we'll never know what happened to that money. We all know it's going to corruption and graft. And it's going to NGOs, right? And which they're in the business of making sure we have homeless people, because if they cure it, they are out of a job. So my point is this left-right divide is fake. And that's been the message of my show, is that because, everybody thinks that all my liberal friends in Hollywood think if we just vote Democrat, it'll fix things. Well, we did it in California, and things are fucking horrible in California. They can't even build a goddamn train. They've spent $15 billion on it, and they got about 10 feet of train track. That's it. And so, so speak to that about that. That's the oldest. My neighbor is not my enemy. And by the way, you did not vote for Trump, right? And even in 2020, you knew you didn't vote for Trump and support him. And tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. I don't believe it's a left-right thing. And I find myself, having very good conversations with super liberal people, with black supremacists, with white supremacists, people that I never really would have thought that I would connect with. We're all kind of connecting on this issue because I think we're starting to realize that we've been sold a bill of goods, and that, the problem in America is not, oh, it's these stupid liberals, or, oh, it's these crazy conservatives, because we got Trump, right? And so what do we get with that? A bunch of fucking problems. Okay, well, we had Biden. What do we get with that? A bunch of fucking problems. So it's clearly not, we get the Democrats in and they're going to fix everything, and now we got a Republican in. It's like, and that's been going on since, for a long time in America. And I think people are starting to see it's, I really like George Galloway's way of putting this. He said, two cheeks of the same ass.
Mm-hmm.
They're both clapping together. And, it's true, man. It's not a left-right problem. But I think what happened is the media fed the left some pretty crazy talking points and got them pretty radicalized and convinced them that white supremacy was the greatest threat to America, and that these Nazis and, all this stuff, and got them all pumped up. And I think a lot of liberals have a good heart. Like, I really believe, and that's actually why I connected with Sean King, a guy that I never would have talked to in a million years, who's like the super, black supremacist, ultra liberal, whatever. And I had respect for him because he started speaking out about the genocide, and he started speaking out for Palestine. Same with Greta Thunberg. I mean, she went to jail for it. So I look at the left, and I think a lot of them have made real sacrifices for what they believe in. And my thought process, my belief system is that it doesn't matter if you're right or wrong. I judge people on their intentions. So if somebody is doing what they believe is right, even if it's incorrect, I wouldn't negatively judge them for that. Like as long as they're operating with a pure heart and they're doing what they believe in, we can disagree. They could be wrong, whatever. But I think that that's what matters. And I think in politics, you don't have that at all. You don't have people doing what they believe is right. You have them doing what's best for them and their donors. And so, this is not something where, we're going to vote the Democrats in and they're going to fix this, or we're going to bring in the Republicans and they're going to fix this. They both have problems. They just have different problems. And they both seem to agree on the worst issues, which is, hey, let's fund a genocide.
Yeah, yes. So what would be your top issue besides Palestine and Israel? What would be your top issue?
Well, actually America first. Like, let's focus on actually fixing our country. Let's make our government run efficiently. Let's not have it be such a bloated monstrosity. Let's use our tax dollars efficiently. Let's learn how to balance a fucking checkbook. Because this whole kick the can down the road, bail out all these Jewish banks, it's just nonsense. We need to focus on America. Why is the Federal Reserve a private bank dictating what our interest rate is? Why are they printing our dollars? Why were they even set up in the first place? I mean, federal income tax is unconstitutional. I think our whole system needs a massive overhaul. And I don't think that Americans understand how good we could have it if our government was actually working for the benefit of the people instead of the benefit of the assholes running it. And I think that we have wandered a long way from where our founding fathers wanted this country to be, and I think we need to bring it back.
Do you have any support from non-Zionist Jews?
Do I have any support from non-Zionist Jews?
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, I still maintain friendships with some of my Jewish friends, and I've had some really good conversations, and some of the non-Zionist Jews have come out and they've supported me, and I look at what Dave Smith is doing, and I think he's doing a great job. Norm Finkelstein. There's a lot of these guys that are Jewish that are making extremely good points, and have been some of the pioneers coming out, speaking out against Israel because they were able to do it and not be smeared as an anti-Semite, kind of like how Candace Owens was allowed to talk about, some of the problems with black crime in this country because she was black, so they couldn't just label her racist. And I think that's good. I think we need to really promote a message of unity in this country. We need to start coming together and stop with this fucking finger pointing and it's this person's fault and this person's fault. And just focus on what's best for America for once. I just feel like it's been so long since this country kind of came together and had a sense of nationalism and unity, instead of everybody just blaming each other. I mean, it seems like we're on the verge of a civil war at this point.
Dan Bilzerian, the world's biggest anti-Semite. Here's his website. It's bilzerianforcongress.com. If you want to support, you want to donate, where is your money coming from?
Well, I'm putting some in myself, and we've got some smaller donors that have all kind of come together and donated to this cause, and that was pretty moving, because I can look at the back end and I can see every single person and exactly what they've donated, and they, some of them leave messages and stuff, and I'll be honest, I was not excited about doing this at all, but that did motivate me seeing, because I know some of these guys, they gave, some of them it was $10 or whatever, but I could, they're just like, hey man, this is all I could give, but I support you and whatever. And, that's just, it's meaningful. And then obviously, people that donate large amounts of money, it's, extremely meaningful as well. And it just, because these people are doing it and they're not getting any credit for it. And to me, I think that is the ultimate form of giving, is when you do something because it's the right thing to do and it's anonymous. Because, somebody hits that website and goes and, donates $1,000, nobody pats them on the back. Their name's not on a wall. Nobody sees that. They're just doing that because they believe in the cause and they want to fix this country. And that's motivating to me. It really is, because it shows that people actually give a shit and they don't just give a shit about being seen doing good things, which I think is a new trend these days. Everybody wants to be seen being a good person, and So yeah, it gives me some hope, man. But we have some, there's also some people that are, considering giving large amounts as well, like $500,000. And I think that if we raise enough money, we will just absolutely win because we can educate, by knocking on people's doors and explaining what's going on. And we'll just win the election. And I think winning this election is a lot more important than just me getting in. I think this shapes the message of what people run on in 2028 and people having hope that the system isn't completely broken and that a non-traditional, non-politician can actually win. And I think if I win when I get in there and I do all the things that I say I'm going to do, I think it will change the landscape of what happens in 2028, which is why I think this is so important.
Well, I think that's a point that a lot of people don't realize, that, Thomas Massie knocking down the Zionist lobby against him, AIPAC, and all the billionaires that funded Trump are against him. And then when he beats them, and then if you beat Randy Fine, it would really shape things for 2028. I just can't wait to see a presidential candidate trying to defend taking money from AIPAC, or keep saying that Israel's our number one ally, and instead of they're the ones who are constantly getting us into wars. So I think you're right. If you succeed and Thomas Massie succeeded, it will change the landscape for 2028. So that's at least there's not many bright spots, but if that happens, that would certainly be a bright spot. It would change politics in America for sure.
I agree. And I think we got to do it now. And I've donated to Thomas Massie's campaign as well. And I think that if we don't do it and we don't take control of this country in the next 2 years with Palantir and the surveillance state, I think we're smoked. So I think there needs to be a real sense of urgency here. I don't think people understand how delicate the situation is. I mean, look, if the Iran situation goes sideways, it literally could be the end of the world. And so that's kind of the stakes of what we're at right now. And I think it's important. I think people need to really start paying attention. The price that good men pay for indifference to foreign affairs is to be ruled by evil men. That was Plato's quote, and I think it's extremely relevant today.
Dan Bilzerian running for Congress, Florida's 6th district, against the biggest piece of it in the world, Randy Fine. Good luck to you. I hope you win.